Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for May 18, 2025. Folks, we're a couple of days late recording our weekly review due to scheduling conflicts. So it's already the middle of the following week. Today is Wednesday, May 21. So we'll cover not only last week, but some of the present week as well. Hrant Mikaelian is with us to unpack some of the recent developments. He's a multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan.
And we'll be covering a slew of issues today, including but not limited to Pashinyan's quiet meetings with Aliyev and Erdogan in Tirana, Lavrov's visit to Yerevan, which is ongoing right now, Armenia's new controversial military service reform, and the shifting battle lines in opposition politics ahead of the 2026 elections. We'll also be introducing a new section at the end of our shows called the kitchen sink or whatever else. Let's see if the kitchen sink holds. Let us know what you think about the name of that section, where we'll talk about everything else that we didn't get to cover. Essentially, we're throwing the kitchen sink at you as well. We hope you appreciate it. Let us know let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts.
And hey, just a quick reminder, please help us by commenting, liking, and sharing our content. We really appreciate it. And then also podcasts.groong.org/donate if you're feeling extra generous. Thank you in advance.
Hello, Hrant. Welcome back on the Groong podcast.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Ողջույն Hrant. So let's just jump into it. Last week, Pashinyan and Arat Mirzoyan, Armenia's foreign minister, quietly attended the European Political Community Summit in Tirana, Albania. Details were scarce, but Pashinyan met with Erdogan and Aliyev at that summit. And we don't know what was discussed, but just yesterday, Aliyev said that he's confident that Pashinyan will eventually accept all of his demands, which seem to be ever expanding. So given that in March, the entire world celebrated, congratulated, ovated Armenia for agreeing to the so-called peace plan. What is Aliyev referring to about sooner or later, and what demands exactly?
Well, the so-called peace talks have failed at least twice lately. First case was in New York in September 2024, when Blinken was a mediator, and during the UN summit, he tried to organize a meeting between Armenia and Azerbaijan to conclude the peace talks. And after that meeting, Azerbaijan has stated that we have not agreed on everything, which means we have not agreed on anything. And this is a well-known formula in diplomacy, but in this case, we see that there is only one side which does not want to agree, which is Azerbaijan. And the same happened in March, because first, Pashinyan has stated that we have concluded negotiations on all 17, if I'm not mistaken, points of the so-called agreement. And then on Azerbaijani side, they also have stated that they agree that everything has been agreed, the text of the agreement. And the very next day, from Azerbaijan, they started saying that this is not what you think. In reality, there is no agreement. It is problematic. First, Armenia should change its constitution. Then there is so-called Zangezur Corridor, and then there are Azerbaijanis which should be repopulated to Armenia, and so on and so forth. So they started bringing up new demands.
And also we should say that immediately after that, Azerbaijan became more aggressive on the border. Virtually every single day, they were shooting across the border.
Yeah, right. And also, during that days, they have made some other steps, which are, first, they have closed all international news agencies editions in Azerbaijan, which are present there, including both Russian, American, and UK BBC. So Azerbaijan has become less and less transparent for international media and for overall the outsider world, which is, I think, important, because if Azerbaijan is preparing for the war, the international media is first to report about that. Then they have closed down all the international agencies, including UN and lately, for example, UNFPA and many other UN agencies. So as of now, basically there are no international agencies working in Azerbaijan. That's another important thing. I think what Azerbaijan is doing, it is going in completely opposite direction, but at the same time, they want to seem constructive in some way for the Western mediators and to seem like it's not them who are destroying the negotiation. But at the same time, they don't want to have a negotiated agreement. And the reason is the following. If the agreement contradicts the goal, then agreement worsens your situation. And if you can achieve your goals better with military means, not with diplomacy, this means that you should escape the negotiations in this or another way, which is obviously what Azerbaijan is doing. Another important thing here is that they usually say that they demand one-to-one negotiations when Azerbaijan and Armenia are negotiating in some, places. It can be Tirana or it can be Tbilisi, for example. Georgia wants to be a negotiating table. Then Kazakhstan has also offered its service. But at the same time, they say that mediators are not good. And we have had a long-living format of Minsk Group. By the way, it still exists, but formally not working lately. And the Minsk Group co-chairs were Russia, US, and France, which was symbolizing presence of the European Union. So basically, it was a very well-balanced format for a very long period of time. And now Azerbaijan demands that Armenia agrees on abandoning Minsk Group. So three of the last demands of Azerbaijan, in this case, were the following. Disbanding the Minsk Group, which also means abandoning the whole negotiating agreements which have been achieved through the whole process between 1992 and 2020. Next was calling back all court cases, including international courts, which are mainly from Armenia to Azerbaijan against ethnic cleansing of Artsakh and not only. And the third was removing any foreign powers from the borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which as of this time includes European Union observers, which are stationed on Armenia-Azerbaijan border in Syunik and some other places. So basically, Azerbaijan wants to remove these observers to be, let's say, free to attack Armenia at any point. And by the way, this agreement might be stretched to Turkey further at some point on a next stage when they will demand removing Russian forces from Armenian Turkish border. But
Right.
anyway, Pashinyan has agreed on these three last conditions of the so-called peace treaty. And after that, Aliyev said that it's not enough, there are some preconditions. And then they say that we need one-to-one discussions. But in Tirana, in Albania, Erdogan has brought Pashinyan and Aliyev together, which obviously shows that in reality, one-on-one negotiations are one-on-two negotiations, where Turkey and Azerbaijan are acting as a single player. Not only informally, where, as I say, one nation, two states, Turkey and Azerbaijan coordinate their policy completely at every small moment, especially towards Armenia, but also formally, or at least semi-formally, where Turkey is already acting like not just negotiator, but of course as a side. But then we see that, Turkey plus Azerbaijan versus Armenia is a complete nonsense. They will be only dictating conditions. So if there is European Union, Russia, and United States in between, there is one story. But when there is only Turkey instead of them, that's completely another story. So it also depends. It also depends on Armenian side. But Pashinyan said he will agree on abandoning Minsk Group, if the so-called peace treaty talks are finished and the agreement is signed.
Yeah. So speaking of Turkey, it is strange how Pashinyan is basically cowering to Erdogan to help negotiations with Aliyev, even though, as you said, Azerbaijan and Turkey are coordinating their activities. It should be mentioned that Turkey has been blockading the Armenian border since the early 90s. Essentially, in international law, that can be classified as an act of war. And the only, and essentially Erdogan has been saying that, once you reach this peace agreement with Aliyev, then I will open the borders. And that seems to be okay internationally. But we don't know much about Pashinyan's meeting with Erdogan, although opposition news is writing about new demands coming from Aliyev's mouth, but apparently dictated by Erdogan, about removing Mount Ararat from Armenia's coat of arms, which has been a demand from Turkey since the 1990s, but successful future Armenian leaders were able to essentially quash that demand. Not a peep from Turkey since the 1990s about this demand. And the coat of arms, which includes Mount Ararat, as we said, is described in the Armenian constitution as well. So that's one of the other things, I guess, that both Aliyev and Erdogan are seeking. But do you have any more thoughts about what could have been discussed between Pashinyan and Erdogan specifically?
No, in reality, they have held many meetings, including those about which we don't have no information. And there have been cases where when Erdogan is telling the Armenian public through media that he has met Pashinyan, but Pashinyan has never told it himself. So
Acknowledged, yeah.
In reality, Pashinyan is trying to keep this negotiation track secret, which of course means that he is negotiating something which will not be acceptable for Armenian public, but he is still doing that. Regarding the coat of arms, I would say that in reality, Turkey has raised this issue at least since 1940s to the Soviet Union. And since then, it has been multiple times rejected. But Pashinyan seems to be accepting it because he has already stated that our main mountain is Aragat, which is funny. And he has put Aragats on every, stamp here and there. So this is a preparation step before changing coat of arms, obviously. So I think that's what he's doing, and he will go. He will meet these Turkish demands, but I think unfortunately for him, that's not the only issue.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, Pashinyan also met with European leaders, strong leaders like Macron and Kaja Kallas, who are fighting a war with Russia and who called for a swift peace deal with Azerbaijan. But after 4 years of concessions from Pashinyan and mockery from Aliyev, that chat feels hollow. Europe's interests seem to have faded since Pashinyan gave up on Artsakh, and now it seems on Armenia too. Macron repeated the usual line about supporting Armenia's sovereignty, and one might wonder why Pashinyan is even at a summit called Securing Europe. Is there any significant outcome for Pashinyan to claim or to announce from his visit to Tirana and meeting with European leaders?
Well, regarding Macron, we can remember that once he said that he supports Artsakh more than Pashinyan does. On one hand, it's not very hard to do because Pashinyan has done everything he could to concede Artsakh to Azerbaijan. But on the other hand, when Azerbaijan held an aggression and an ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, what did Macron say? Nothing. So Macron's words are very weak, unfortunately. Now, regarding what Pashinyan gained from there, Pashinyan wants to have a next European political community meeting in Yerevan, which will be his big own diplomatic success, I think. It's not yet decided. We will see. But at some point, they might even support if they decide that Yerevan might be an important spot for such a meeting. But at the same time, Lavrov, while being in Yerevan, he said, "We will not welcome this because this European political community is just OSCE minus Russia and Belarus, which means basically, when someone is not in the room, this means that the room is united against someone. So they will not welcome Armenia enhancing this movement. But anyway, I don't think this is in any case important. It's just, place to talk. So I don't think Armenia at all can gain anything from this format.
It's I mean, we'll talk about elections later, but it would be interesting if Pashinyan, if this summit does take place, if Pashinyan times it to happen during the elections to show support from Europeans.
Hrant, you mentioned Sergei Lavrov in Yerevan. He just arrived yesterday. And the two-day visit that he's on is framed as support for Armenia's efforts in normalization talks with Turkey and Azerbaijan. This, of course, comes in the middle of very deepening distrust between Armenia and Russia, and this distrust is fueled by Pashinyan's government. Can you talk a little bit about what Russia's goals are, what role it is seeking in the normalization of relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan and between Armenia and Turkey?
Okay, now Russia's goals are the following. First, they want Yerevan to be a predictable partner, which under Pashinyan's rule, it is not. Second, they want to remain as an important player in the South Caucasus, which means that if any negotiation between Armenia and Turkey or Armenia and Azerbaijan is concluded, then Russia is in, at least as a part of mediator group, or preferably for them as a main mediator. That is why Lavrov has cited the so-called November 9 agreement, which is of course nonsense, especially after the ethnic cleansing, which in normal situation, Armenian diplomacy would say that, first we should get back to the situation on the ground under which this agreement has been signed, then we should talk about its implementation or the following steps. But in reality, Russia does not want the November 9 agreement as it was, but in reality, it wants just to be a main negotiator. That's what they want. And here, Armenian diplomacy should have put a question. Okay, what is the difference between your negotiation and Western negotiation?
Right. They should be asking, what's in it for
mediation.
us?
Yeah. And in reality, before 2023, there was a difference because Russia's offer was, let's leave a Karabakh status for now, let's say for a decade or more, and then come back to this question after a generation. So let's leave this question for the next generation because now we have no power to resolve it. At least this would leave Armenians in Artsakh and leave the possibility to transform a conflict. But since Pashinyan has decided to go on, Brussels pathway, where they told him to just abandon Artsakh and let Russian forces removed, and then Russian forces decided not to intervene in any way when there was an ethnic cleansing process on Azerbaijani side. As of now, I don't understand why and how Russian mediation is different from the Western one. So as of now, I think Russia has very weak offer on one hand, but on another hand, of course, it should not be ignored. At least we should study, we should participate, we should try to improve the situation, which is not good. And also regarding the so-called normalization process, in reality, Russia just wants to be in if there is any process. They don't have any specific demands, as some say that they want, so-called Zangezur Corridor. It's not Russia who wants it. It's obviously Turkey. So, Russia just wants to be in if the process is going.
So last week, Hrant, we talked with Iranian analyst Ehsan Movahedian. He said Iran firmly opposes an extraterritorial corridor through Armenia while Russia backs it, hoping to use Azerbaijan to skirt Western sanctions. What we wanted to know is Russia trading Armenian and Iranian national interests for its own short-term needs while the war in the Ukraine continues? What is the disagreement, the policy disagreement between Russia and Iran based on?
Well, if you put question firmly. Is Russia trading Armenian and Iranian interests for its own use? Of course it does, as everyone else does. But if we look at it in detail, I think Ehsan, of course, is correct when he says that Iran is the main power who opposes this corridor. But I don't agree that Russia supports this corridor. Instead, Russia thinks that if Turkey and Azerbaijan are right now dictating the conditions of peace, and if they are dictating a condition of the negotiating process and overall situation in the region, especially if Armenia agrees on their demands, then the so-called Zangezur Corridor will exist in any case. And if it will exist, Russia wants to be there. That's their own goal, only goal, because Russia is not in any case capable of using this so-called corridor. It's far away. It does not meet any Russian destination. It's just a corridor between Turkey and, in fact, Central Asia. That's what it is. And I don't see how Russia can benefit from this. Only Russia can be there or out, in or out. So Russia decides to be in. That's the only thing.
Ehsan's thesis was that Russia would like to use Azerbaijan to bypass sanctions, basically routing some of its energy resources through Azerbaijan, possibly through straight through Syunik, off to Nakhichevan, and through Turkey.
Well, Russia would, of course, do that if it was possible. But in reality, let's not exaggerate Russia's use of Azerbaijan's energy infrastructure. I've looked at energy, especially gas exports from Azerbaijan to the European Union, and it was not as big. And it has not grown much since 2021. There is some growth, but not very significant, which means that even if Azerbaijan is re-exporting some Russian gas, it's not a significant share of it for Russia. Now, the second thing is that, of course, Russia would bypass Western sanctions using any mean, but I think Zangezur Corridor has no such meaning in reality, because it cannot, in any case, be used to bypass Western sanctions. So the problem is that Zangezur Corridor is not usable for Russia. In reality, Zangezur Corridor is even dangerous for Russia because it will drastically increase Turkish influence in Central Asia. But anyway, as I said, Russia is just not opposing this corridor. Rather, it wants to be in when it will be launched, if it will be launched. And at some point, Azerbaijan has bribed Russians, saying that, okay, we can have this corridor and you will be in. And then Russians decided, oh, it's a good opportunity to be stationed somewhere else, because that's just an opportunistic view of Russians, who are very weak in a soft power, and they are much stronger in hard power. That's why they seek any opportunity to be stationed in any place. And border between Armenia and Iran might technically be an important place. By the way, they have been there, and Pashinyan has removed them. So now they might be back if the so-called corridor is launched, and they are there. But lately we have heard how Aliyev said that they don't need Russians anymore there.
Right.
So in reality, it was an intermediary solution for Azerbaijan and Turkey to bribe Russians by a so-called opportunity that they can be stationed there. And at some point, Russians agreed. But again, Russians are not supporting this project. They are just trying to gain out of it if it will be launched. If.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how the demand by Azerbaijan not to have any third country forces on the border also affect this corridor. God forbid if it is ever implemented. But let's continue, and I guess that's more speculation than anything else. Let's talk about some internal affairs, shall we? We can talk about democracy, in quotes, in double air quotes, Pashinyan style democracy. We have a lot of international listeners. We have listeners from foreign embassies and foreign NGOs. So We're going to talk about persecution of journalists. We're going to talk about corruption. Yes, corruption by the Pashinyan regime. So let's talk about media and journalism. So one case came up recently during the 2021 election campaign. Pashinyan visited Sunik with a 2,000-strong police contingent. He was met with angry residents in the southern province who demonstrated calling Pashinyan a traitor and many other choice words and demanded that he leave the province. It was called the infamous Sunyats Vokchuin, the hello from Sunik, which is just basically a euphemism for insults. So local station reporter from Zangezur TV, Anush Mirzoyan, reported and covered these events, and it was picked up all over the media and the internet. Well, now she's being charged with assisting hooliganism through the coverage of her demonstrations. The Armenian law on hooliganism has this clause where it says that if you use technologies to spread hooliganism, then that's also something you can be charged with. So Pashinyan is going ahead with that. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Justice is drafting regulations that will force the media to take down content that is deemed quote-unquote slanderous by authorities. And this was accompanied by, I believe, a demand from Pashinyan, or like I think a post from Pashinyan or someone close to him that said that if the media won't self-regulate, then we will regulate them. And I guess that means that their main concern is so-called slander of the authorities. So why is Hrant Pashinyan cracking down on the press? Is it damage control or fear of losing control? And why now?
First of all, I want to support Zangezur TV reporter Anush Mirzoyan. I know her for a very long time. She has been interviewing me since more than a decade ago. And not only for that, of course, but for her as a journalist and citizen. And of course, it is illegal to persecute someone for covering a protest action. Okay, if you call a protest action a hooliganism, and then you persecute a journalist who is reporting that, that means that you are completely abandoning free speech and free media. And here, I think, first of all, we can remember a case of Lili Tarikan, who was detained 2 weeks ago and has been beaten in police. Her sister came from Germany, saying that she has connected, she has been in touch with her sister, and she said that her sister is under life threat.
Hrant, this is the reporter in Gyumri?
Right, she is from Gyumri. So this is also a new case. So basically, we have more and more laws recently, which are limiting and forbidding free speech in reality in the country, and limiting freedom of the press. Unfortunately, Reporters Without Borders did not recognize it, and as they have put Armenia on the 34th position in the world in the freedom of the press ranking of this year. Well, basically, it covers the last year.
That was gonna be my question. Why aren't Western civil society and Western governments recognizing this? Is it no budget for protests when there are guys in charge? So it seems to be
Well,
very certainly.
if it's not our protest, and if this journalist is not being paid by us, this means that this is not a journalist. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want with this protest. Last year, there was a very brutal crackdown on the protest on June 12th. Very minor coverage from the Western side. American embassy has condemned protesters, which in reality were peaceful. Also, we can remember how European Union has reacted. They said March 1st, 2008 was worse than, well, first of all, it is debatable because the protesters themselves have been acting completely differently. But in any case, even if March 1st was much worse, what connection this has to June 12th, 2024, 16 years later? So basically, they have
They could have gone to
supported
1939 and mentioned Stalin's times. That was even worse than right now.
Yeah, that was much worse. Definitely much worse. So how this justifies Pashinyan's actions? Basically, this means that they directed him to crack down on the journalists, on the protesters, and so on. That's how I understand this. And also, we can remember how they have been making very harsh statements against opponents, both Nikol Pashinyan himself and First Lady Anna Hakopian. So basically, we see more and more aggressive and harsh rhetoric on their side, which is answering to your question. I think, yes, it is more of damage control, and it's sign of fear. Of course, we have some people in jails who are journalists, who are political activists, and so on. Not many, some have been released, but some of politicians are still there. So basically, what we have here is authoritarianism trying to cover it with a democracy mask. And yes, Pashinyan is afraid because the geopolitical situation is changing, and the geopolitical situations like 10 to 5 years ago was much better for him than what it is now. And he understands that it might worsen. We see that so-called far-right parties win, or at least are close to win elections in European countries, in the West, in this region, and the parties which are supporting Pashinyan are losing the ground. Macron himself as well. And Biden was supporting Pashinyan, he's gone, and so on. And by the way, the Georgian government is not very big friend of Pashinyan, and so on. So basically, he's afraid of geopolitical situation. Especially, he's afraid of how Russia-Ukraine talks and overall conflict will be finished, and how it will affect the situation in South Caucasus. And that is why he's trying to take under control the whole situation in Armenia.
Okay, so from journalists, let's talk about municipal governments. Yerevan first. Multiple officials last week, close to Mayor Tigran Avinyan, were arrested for bribery, and he faces backlash over unpopular fare hikes and public discontent about municipal policies in general. How close is the Yerevan public to essentially losing complete confidence in the administration of Tigran Avinyan? And could these corruption probes eventually reach himself as well? Because, we know his involvement in was it ANIF, Armenian National Investment Fund? What else do you know about alleged corruption activities surrounding Tigran Avinyan?
To be frank, I don't know much. I know one case when allegedly Avinyan's family was involved in some corruption in the agricultural funds in Ararat province. And also, from what we know, Yerevan city council has always been rather corrupt body. Under previous administration, under current administration, and it could even remain after under the next administration. So, and also, by the way, we see that it's not very efficient. For example, if we remember what, for example, Hovik Manucharyan and Nikol Pashinyan, who has been with him at the time, in 2018, they have been promising lots of things, including a new metro station, or maybe 2 new metro stations by 2021, and lots of other things. Nothing has been done, or very little, much less than what was projected by even the previous mayor and the previous government back in 2017. They had lots of programs which have not been fulfilled even now completely. And there is another question, which is overall approval of Tigran Avinyan as a mayor, because we can remember how in 2023, September 2023, Yerevan City Council elections, the Civil Contract Party, which was headed by Tigran Avinyan, has got just 32.6% of votes in Yerevan elections, with many voting against everyone and very low participation rate. So basically 9.4% of all voters voted for this party, which is very weak result, and by itself shows very weak legitimacy. I'm not sure if it has changed much since then, but even from the scratch, it was very low. So I don't know how it is connected to these cases. Maybe they are just combating the corruption. Maybe it was just a very obvious case to which the police could not avoid reacting. It can easily be like that. But also there was one more scandal. You can remember that in Nor Nork Yerevan's
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah,
council. Yeah. So basically, Pashinyan has forced that representative of Republic Party to resign because the party itself has supported the representative, the head of Nor Nork council.
district.
So
Yeah.
district council. Thank you. So basically, we see that that at least from Pashinyan's perspective, the municipal situation in municipal councils is not stable. We have seen a month ago how they have lost two elections, one in Gyumri and one in Parakar. And we have many more cases like this. So maybe they are trying to improve situations in the provinces and in Yerevan as well, because they feel that at least nationally they have some ground, but locally they are very weak.
Yeah, I want to remind our listeners that when the Nor Nork incidents happened, Pashinyan actually did not condemn it. In fact, he defended the actions of his underlings or his allies, and that was when that entire brawl or hoopla in parliament started. He started again screaming like a madman that you should all be in jail and so forth. So I was just thinking, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but is it also possible that Tigran Avinyan might be thrown under the bus by Pashinyan? Maybe this is a way, maybe these arrests are related to infighting between Avinyan and Pashinyan itself. What can you say
I
about
don't
that?
expect this, to be frank, because Pashinyan is now running out of good team.
Allies, yeah.
Allies, cadres, let's say, because in reality, he has removed some of important team members of the government back in autumn 2024, because he thought they are getting too strong, especially the head of police. And now for him, the crucial point is loyalty. So unless Tigran Avinyan is becoming disloyal to Pashinyan, he will remain there because Pashinyan has no good alternative as of now. And what we see is that people who are appointed on some positions, they are weaker and weaker, less and less known, and so on and so forth.
Hrant, we are talking about issues that seem to be leading up to the national elections in Armenia in 2026. Pashinyan's approval, as you've mentioned before, is very low right now, but it's still better than any of the other single opposition parties. With Baku demanding so many concessions, these elections could reshape the country's future, obviously, especially since Pashinyan is very amenable to these concessions. This week, former President Robert Kocharian gave a major interview accusing Pashinyan of corruption and saying he's ready to return to power. Though many see him as part of the discredited former or Nakhin leadership, Kocharian is betting he can lead again. What's different this time that gives Kocharian confidence that he's going to win?
First of all, what we see now is that pre-election campaign has already basically started, and it has been started by Pashinyan himself. So now the opposition is joining the club, and they're launching their, pre-election campaigns. We have seen some statements by Serge Sargsyan, who is head of the Republican Party. We have seen some statements by Robert Kocharian, who is head of the Armenia bloc, and every day we are seeing new and new activities by the Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan, who is head of the Civil Contract Party. So basically, three main parties which are represented in the parliament are already, participating in an election campaign. Now, regarding Kocharian and him being discredited, I think, despite all the questions you can have to him, he is much less discredited compared to Pashinyan. I think he cannot be discredited as much as Pashinyan. Although he has much less efficient media campaign, yeah, that's completely different story. But anyway, technically, all three leaders has been ruling Armenia for a long period of time. Pashinyan for 7 years, and Serge Sargsyan and Robert Kocharian each for 10 years. So basically, none of them are new. You can say some are old, but none of them are new, basically. Next, which is, yeah, Pashinyan accuses Kocharian of corruption, but most of these accusations are false because Pashinyan had 7 years to justify, and the whole system under him, which was completely focused on Kocharian himself, to justify his claims. He has done nothing except to, speaking more and more, but the court cases have failed one after another. I'm not saying Kocharian was completely free of corruption, but I think at least Pashinyan has nothing to say about this because he had these cases in the court and he was not able to justify his claims. Now, regarding the overall situation among opposition, now we see a competition between opposition parties, between the Armenia bloc and the Republican Party, which is, in my view, inadequate situation, because instead of combating the government, the opposition started combating each other. And in reality, from what I can get from the opinion polls, it is that support level of both opposition parties is decreasing because they started attacking each other. And I think this is a real problem because they are trying to redistribute votes among the rather modest opposition electorate instead of trying to deal with new voters and to bring new voters to the opposition side, but they are redistributing the existing voters, which is not good strategy because the number of existing voters is not enough to win the election.
Hrant, in addition to the two parties, the two alliances, Hayastan Dashing and Republican, there also seems to be an emerging difference in method, in strategy for 2026. There are those people who believe in the impeachment process and those who believe that they should go for a full-on election and participate in the elections in 2026. Robert Kocharian's Hayastan bloc doesn't believe in the impeachment, which is supported by what are they called again? The Artunem movement, I'm Awake or I'm Aware movement.
Yeah, it's led by Edgar Ghazarian and Narek Malyan.
Yeah. Kocharian believes that they should participate and should win in the election. Meanwhile, Serge Sargsyan's party, the Republicans, don't think that they have a good enough candidate. They don't believe they can win the elections. So they are open to the impeachment movement. What are your thoughts about this? What do you think about these various strategies?
Basically, you can imagine three main strategies of the government change in Armenia. One is election, another is impeachment, and another is street, let's say street protest. There are some other exotic scenarios, but let's not go there. At least three scenarios are here. And I don't see opposition winning in any of these. As of now, opposition in Armenia is incapable of winning, regardless of the scenario. Now, impeachment scenario basically is a tool by the, let's say, supporters of Republican Party to mock the Armenia alliance. Basically, as of now, it's nothing else. With all due respect to Edgar Ghazarian and Narek Malyan, which have proved their capacity to combat in political sphere. They proved that they are not afraid of government crackdown. Narek Malyan has spent 1 year in jail, and so on and so forth. But I don't see how this initiative is bringing opposition to the power or bringing Pashinyan down. What I see,
Especially in a parliament that is dominated, where there's a super majority of the ruling party, how do they expect to get any kind of a positive vote on impeachment?
yeah, basically it's just a tool to mock Kocharian's alliance. And I understand this emotionally because Kocharian's alliance has been for some time, blaming Ser Sargsyan and his team for bringing Pashinyan to power. Now, a Republican Party is responding that if we brought Pashinyan to power, you are keeping him in power because you don't support impeachment. But in reality, both of these statements are not adequate. And I think both parties should more think about electors, about voters, than about each other. And they should think about the future policies, about the program around which they should unite, than about how they should compete with each other. Why I'm saying that? Because regardless of the strategy, well, impeachment, it's not realistic strategy, but regardless if they want to change power through the street or through election, they should gain a lot of popularity against what they have now. So with this current level of popularity, they are able to stay as opposition, but they are not able to gain government position. Moreover, as of now, at least one party, which is the Dog Party, held by Vartan Kukasyan, not Gyumri Vartan Kukasyan, but the foreign blogger Vartan Kukasyan, which can become third party instead of Republican Party. How they are responding to this, for example, I think this is much more important question. So in reality, I think opposition is wasting time. I think they are miscommunicating, and I think they are very tactical instead of being strategical. Basically, that's what I can say.
So for our last topic, and I want to be quick about this, but I think it's important. One of the demands, I mean, we talked about Azerbaijan having many demands against Armenia, or preconditions, even to sign the so-called peace treaty. But one of the demands that has been surfaced, on and off, is the call for demilitarization of Armenia. Okay, Azerbaijan wants to prevent Armenia from ever having power to threaten it again. And amid these calls, the Armenian government has introduced a new bill that would allow draftees to pay around $52,000 to only serve 1 month of military duty. The normal military service is 2 years, although there's talk about shortening that too. I think that they were campaigning in 2021 to shorten it to 1.5 years. So now they're introducing yet another new bill that would, if you're rich and you can afford $52,000, then you can only just go to a month, do something, and then come back and you're done. Does this seem like essentially demilitarization by another name? I mean, what are your thoughts on this bill in general? And also, it's very conspicuous that in the time of Armenia's severe need for stronger security, the Armenian government seems to be reducing its ability to mobilize its forces, and but the potential for having a trained army in the future.
Frankly speaking, I don't think this bill will decrease the manpower of Armenian army significantly. Because honestly speaking, most of those who could afford bribing the military commissions have done that. So now the government is trying to legalize it and to accept these bribes under a law. Now, regarding the social justice or equality issue, this is a very tricky thing because there is such issue. Definitely.
Yeah, it sends a message basically that, the rich will, party and the poor will go and die.
Yeah. And now the question is, how do we improve the army instead of removing the army? And what we should do in the army at all? Well, first of all, looking at Russia-Ukraine war, we see that relying on purely manpower, which has been Armenian strategy, in 90s and 2000s, but has already proved being outdated in 2016, not to talk about 2020. We should think much more about drones. My assessment is that we need 500,000 drones, mainly FPV drones, but also some bigger drones. And that's first thing. So I think we're not looking there at all. Second thing, we need much more military infrastructure. Third, we need to improve condition of serving for young soldiers. Third, we need to improve quality of management of everything else. And of course, one of the crucial things is to decrease probability of dying, because in reality, if we rely on the purely manpower, while Azerbaijan will rely on UAVs, then yes, we will have lots of losses and we will lose the war. So basically, I think the focus is not there. I think the whole discussion is directed towards the wrong direction. So I don't think this step will bring demilitarization effectively, but instead, I think this proves that Armenian military is not developing to right direction, and no lessons are learned after the 2020 war. And I think we are in much bigger threat even since then. And I think we have lots to learn from Russia's experience and also, of course, Ukraine's experience in this war, which is ongoing right now. And again, I think we're looking in completely wrong direction. And I don't know how about making serving time 18 months or something else. I think we need more military experts here. But anyway, what we need is to state thinking more about defense, especially in military production terms, instead of thinking about new wine festivals. That's for sure.
All right, well, let's wrap up our topics here. Time to ask each of you if you have some thoughts you would like to share with our audience. Hovik, go first.
So just before this show, I was on Twitter, and I read a post by an Armenian Euro. We call them Euros, the Euro wannabes, And this person basically showed a video where Pashinyan in Tirana goes and wrestles the umbrella away from one of the security staff and holds it so that Macron and him can, walk and smile with each other. And then this person says, compare like when Pashinyan was in Moscow. It was a grim event, and Pashinyan was very, sad. Now he's in Europe, and look at him smile. Unfortunately, this person does not mention the images of Pashinyan standing next to Aliyev and Erdogan, where he was like sort of begging for time, and Aliyev just basically whisked him away with his hand. Or Erdogan as well, like when Erdogan asked Pashinyan a question, and then Pashinyan like smiled and responded, and then I said, okay, like now we have to go and talk, and then Aliyev and himself like went their own direction, and he was like sort of left standing. I just want to say that the tactics that Euro Armenians use to conduct propaganda knows no boundaries, knows no depths. I'm just ashamed that some are painting this visit to Tirana as some kind of a success, whereas it was just humiliation upon humiliation for us.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Hrant, what's on your mind?
Let me continue Hovik's topic, because in reality it was funny. Yeah, Pashinyan was very gloomy in Moscow and very happy in Tirana, especially when he met Erdogan and Aliyev. So whenever he meets Putin, he is gloomy. Whenever he meets Aliyev and Erdogan, especially, he is shining. We can remember how he got Erdogan's book, and he was completely shining there. So I think it does not tell us anything about European political community or Moscow. It tells us much more about Pashinyan himself. And people who are relying on Pashinyan's emotions when he is in Tirana or he is meeting Macron, instead of thinking what it will bring to Armenia, I think they are completely failing to understand what the state is.
I wanted to note really quickly about the Armenian parliament, which can only be considered a democratic institution in a Clausewitzian kind of a framework, meaning to say that these people must consider all of the fistfights, brawls, and abusive behavior towards women MPs to somehow be a form of policymaking by any other means. How else can we justify such idiotic actions by the Armenian parliament? So, yeah,
Yeah.
long live the Armenian
Yeah,
parliament.
basically we have achieved gender parity, at least in a political repressions direction. Now they are oppressing women journalists to maybe the same extent as men. At least here we have achieved it.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Hrant, for joining us today. I know it was kind of short
Thank
notice,
you.
but thanks for coming on the show. We will talk to you very soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Hovik, you suggested that we should have a little section after our guest has departed to talk to each other about our impressions on the topics and whatever else we wanted to do. Let me first start this section, which may or may not be called the kitchen sink. With some of the topics that we had on the docket and we didn't get to, like below the line, we wanted to touch on the India-Pakistan topic because that affects our area. But I guess we're going to find an expert to talk with us, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
fact,
definitely.
we
We have
have
several.
somebody. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's an important topic. I think that the terrorism supported by Pakistan is condemnable and is exactly the same source as the Turkish and Azerbaijani terrorism against Armenia. And we should do more to highlight that fact and the cooperation and the fact that these three nations call themselves brotherly nations. So if there was a third member in the Azerbaijani-Turkish friendship group, it would be Pakistan.
Pakistan. Yeah.
And maybe Israel after that.
We also wanted to talk a little bit about the genocide in Gaza, which somehow the US government has erased from the radar screens of the US population. Nobody almost hears anything in mainstream media about this, and it has accelerated. And by some reports, the estimates are that since the October 7 date to a year and a half ago, 2 years ago almost 2 or 300,000 Palestinians have been killed off. And the question we wanted to address was all these presidents come and go, Bush 1, Bush 2, Obama. You had some thoughts about this, that nothing changes. Nothing ever changes.
I mean, the U.S. policy has always been to foster, militancy in the region as a form of control. But I think in this case, the genocide in Gaza takes special importance in the fact that it is so brazen. And I think Israel is gearing up to reoccupy some of the areas in Gaza and
Well,
shrink
they're saying all of it. They're
all of
saying
it. Yeah,
all of it.
essentially.
They
Yeah.
want to occupy all of it. I mean, there's talk that Trump is talking about moving over 1 million Palestinians to Libya, where there's a puppet government right now, so they can get them to, just like Pashinyan, they can get them to sign on to anything. So move 1 million Palestinians out. There will be another 900,000. Maybe they can shove them over the border to southern Syria, Jordan, or whatever they can. And
I wouldn't be
basically,
surprised if even Armenia would be on that list. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but if I read somewhere that Armenia decided to accept Palestinians, although I feel very bad for Palestinians, if there anyone wants to come, they're welcome, but this is a way of depopulating their homeland. And all of these governments are crony governments, puppet governments are taking part in it.
yeah, for the
So,
record, not all Palestinians are Muslim Palestinians, by the way. There are a lot of Christian Palestinians as well,
and Armenian
and
Palestinians
Armenian
as well.
Palestinians. Absolutely.
Exactly. Katya, our other Groong co-contributor, is, I believe, has her roots from Palestine.
Similarly, I have uncles from who are Palestinian Armenians originally. who are no longer
Mhm.
there anymore. And another topic we left on the docket is something we touched with Professor Ehsan Movahidian last week, and that had to do with the Abraham Accords and Steve Witkoff trying to link the Abraham Accords to a possible agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the South Caucasus. And we're trying to understand a little bit more about what that means. You know, is it beneficial? Is it a trap? Is it a what the hell is it, basically?
It's a very important topic. We didn't have time to cover it, but we're gonna make every effort to cover that. And in general, Trump's visit to the Middle East, we understand that we have been covering that very lightly. So, but we are paying attention to it. Witkoff mentioning sticking his nose into Armenia, Azerbaijan. It doesn't smell good, to be honest. I'm not sure. Just but we'll talk to some experts and see if we can have more structured discussions around that topic as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that Witkoff initially seemed like he was seeing some success in Israel, but as we see what's unfolding in Gaza, it's clear that Trump's policies, even through Stephen Witkoff,
Yeah.
have really failed or something. Here are a couple of things I'll mention. Hovik, you expand on them as you desire. We left the visit of the Iranian defense minister to Yerevan right now. As a matter of fact, yes, it started yesterday. We left
Yeah.
that on the table. The chaos in the parliament, the threats from Pashinyan. We barely alluded to Ter-Margaryan's resignation in the Nor Nork council district in
Yeah,
Yerevan.
so that I want to stop on.
Yeah,
Ter-Margaryan is basically along with his cronies. We talked about it with Benjamin Bedrossian, I think a few weeks ago, where they basically beat up Arthur Chahoyan, who was there to attend the public session of the council, district council. So he resigned last week, but boohoo, while Chahoyan still faces serious charges and possible jail time, Bucha Tigran, we call him Bucha Tigran from now on. He got off lightly, but I wouldn't be surprised if he reappears in government once this all blows over, because that's how Pashinyan's cronyism works.
yeah, I didn't
And
want to interrupt Hrant when he was talking, but that's exactly what I was talking about. The thing is that the circle of trust around Pashinyan is so tight. There are so few people in that circle that you see these people reappearing over and over. So this
yeah,
Ter-Margaryan guy, he may be forced to resign right now. We feel like, oh, corruption is not being tolerated. He goes and finds another important role, and that's not usually well advertised. So we don't know that the same corrupt people are ending up in other important roles.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just a revolving door policy in this administration to just take one person out of the limelight where they've seen a lot of negative PR to someplace else and basically hide them there for a while.
yeah.
Look at Arsen
And
Bedrossian, for example, a complete failure as Minister of Health.
health.
And we thought he got removed and things will improve. And the guy,
What do you call, like, they are fired up? Is that how it's called? Like, when they
yeah,
fire
that's
and
right, they're not
fired by
fired and
promotion.
out.
Yeah. I think that a few other things we missed is this Lavrov visit. While the main issues, we talked about, there are many sub contexts and sub issues. One of them is Armenia's acquisition of weapons from Russia, which is basically now at zero. And the Armenian government boasts that they have basically been able to reduce their dependence on a single source by 95%. And they're referring to Russia, of course. In light of what we're seeing that Armenia is attempting to do to replace Russia, it is to buy French weapons, which are not in Armenia, which is not known how they're going to appear in Armenia because of geopolitical geography and because of geopolitics. They can and same with Indian. It's NATO standard versus Armenia is CSTO standard. So a lot of questions remain to be asked,
Yeah,
and
Hovik, by the way,
simply,
the numbers don't bear that really.
yeah,
I think that $1.25 billion are spent over a number of years, I think, on Indian weaponry and about $250 million on French weaponry. I'm working out from the top of
yeah,
my head. I haven't read these things just as research for today.
yeah,
But so there are these two sources. And like you said, Russian sources become zero. We don't cooperate really on weaponry level with Iran, so there's nothing from there, which is the most natural partnership that I can imagine under the current conditions. So
mhm,
I also don't know exactly what this means. There's this PR buzzwordism that Armenia has cut its defense import dependence.
And to be fair, I think that Lavrov also said that we're fighting a war in Ukraine. Naturally, we need to redirect our effort there. So there is some indication, at least verbally, that Lavrov is using the excuse of the war in Ukraine for delays in arming Armenia. But the point of the story is that Armenia should be building its own military industrial complex. It should be building factories where at least some of the basic weaponry and basic armaments are produced, which means artillery shells, it means missiles, and we're seeing no news about that. Perhaps, some say it's secret, but
It's been such a secret that nothing's coming to fruition.
And Aliyev, has no mention, hasn't found, even Aliyev hasn't found it, because you can be sure that as soon as Armenia tried even to think about that, Aliyev would attack. It's sad, but the only solution is to have security guarantees from a friendly country to Armenia, under which Armenia could safely develop its military industrial complex for defensive purposes, which it absolutely is entitled to, and which is being denied right now by complicity, none the least from Pashinyan himself. And you mentioned the Iranian case. And just to close, in the context of demilitarization demands by Azerbaijan, Aliyev has been saying that Armenia must return any weapon it has purchased from France, from India, or from any third power back to its seller. So,
Yeah.
I hope Pashinyan can find the customer service desk at the in the Indian Walmart, or I'm sorry, wherever they bought their weaponry from, because that's what
let me
Aliyev is
loop this
demanding.
back to what Aliyev said just yesterday, was it, or today, that he is expecting that Pashinyan will accept all of his preconditions. So anyway, that's it for me.
And on this happy note,
that was our weekend review for May 18. Today is May 21, as I said earlier. We've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political analyst and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. He's also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute and a co-founder of the Armenian Project.
And folks, before we go, one more time, please send us some love, either in the form of donations, podcasts.groong.org/donate, or in the form of likes, shares, and comments under our videos. We truly appreciate it. It goes a long way for us. Thank you very much. All right. I'm Hovik Manucharyan.
And I'm Asbed Bedrossian. Both of us in Los Angeles right now. Find us everywhere you find your Armenian news. We'll talk to you next.